We go. Okay, the record. It is now live. Okay, welcome everyone to hopefully our last meeting of the year. So I'm gonna call this meeting to order this April 26th, 2022. I'd like to acknowledge that Wilfrid Laurier Students Union is on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. As for regrets, I have received that Director Brian will be coming late. But other than that, I don't have received any regrets from anyone else, although we are missing Director McCarthy. Moving forward to the adoption of the agenda. So we do have a couple amendments to make for the agenda today. So can I motion that the Board of Directors amend the agenda to include the July 8th, 2021 meeting minutes approval in that particular agenda item, as well as the removal of the in-camera session today, since the in-camera minutes are not ready for approval, hence we do not need that session today. So motion by Director Shando, second by Director Vale. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on this matter? As I see none, do we have any opposition? Do we have any abstentions? Then the motion carries. Okay, so next we can move on to conflicts of interest. Do we have any conflicts of interest declared today? As I see none, then we can go on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of the meeting minutes. So our board secretary has been working around the clock for the past month to get all the meeting minutes prepared. So we have the meeting minutes from May 31st, July 8th, July 26th, January 4th, January 7th, 16th, January 31st, February 14th, February 28th, March 14th, March 28th, and April 4th. So we do have all those meetings available, but I believe that there are still just some meeting minutes that are missing from the summer months, as well as the in-camera meeting minutes from the winter term. So before we go to the motion, do we have any questions or discussions, since I know that this was a huge bulk and overload of minutes? Yes, Director Vale.
So I'm going to move the motion. If I have a second, or I have a comment or a question as well.
Okay, so you want to move the motion. Do we have a seconder? We have Director Phillips. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would, please. So can we get a list, perhaps operational staff can maybe help facilitate that, just given the timeline, if you don't have time yourself, Mr. Chair, but it's essentially, can we get a list of what minutes are outstanding, and then over the course of the next few days, maybe set up that quick 5-10 minute meeting on Friday for us as a board. Whenever 7 or 8 of us can get together for 5 minutes, and just that'll be our only agenda item, is just approve these, particularly in camera. I'm just conscious that I think as a governance practice, I think that really our board should be the one, especially, given what sort of transpired, to make sure that our records are accurately kind of reflect sort of what went on.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps Thursday, but I guess the point being, like, we're going to need our secretary. I think Thursday would be more ideal personally, but I don't know what our sort of secretary, where he's at here, but I'm just cognizant that it's kind of critical here that we have our records in place. I mean, I'm not so much worried, this meeting or like our, last couple of meetings, but really, I mean, back in summer and certainly in camera, these are things that, I think our board needs to be approving, given that we were the ones present. We know what happened, to ensure that, because again, these are really good organizational records long term.
Yeah, I think the point comes across very clearly. I guess the main ones will be, we still have the August meeting minutes, I believe, unless we approved them already. But we do have, the main ones are the January as well as the April in-camera discussions. So I'll actually ask the board secretary, and I apologize to put on the spot, that if the board were to set a deadline by, I guess, this Thursday, do you think that the meeting minutes would be done by then? The ones that are outstanding?
I would prefer next week if it's possible, just because the in-camera minutes are still like, I still have to do a couple from the winter term. So if it's sometime next week, it could be better, but I'll try my best to get it done by Thursday. That's what the board decides.
Now, the only issue with that is that our term ends as directors on April 30th. So that's why we're trying to make sure. I know that the next board meeting of the new board is May 11th, but I think that Director Vale does bring up a good point that especially this is in-camera minutes regarding our board, it should not be deferred to the next board.
Yeah, then I should be able to get it done by Thursday.
Yeah.
Should be fine.
Okay. Director Vale, I see that you have your hand up.
So what I would say is, I think in terms of order of priority, I think the in-camera should absolutely be the highest priority, and that because, and again, open session, I mean, I mean, certainly the old, and then this subsequent to that, the priority should be really the older open sessions, and then if there's a couple somewhat more recent, even if it's a few months old, I think perhaps the next board it should be in a position to kind of sort of prove that. But really, if we're dealing with in-camera minutes from back, for instance, in the summer or whatnot, then we need to be, as a board, approving those ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a fair point. So I will, as the chair, set up a emergency meeting sometime on Thursday and keep in touch with the secretary to see what meeting minutes we can. And worst case scenario, the non-in-camera minutes, we will have to defer that to the next board for approval. But with that being said, do we have any further discussion on this matter? Does anyone have any concerns with the minutes as they are presented? I have just only one concern that I brought up. So I took a look at the minutes and I noticed that for the April 4th one regarding the budget discussion, there was not many notes on the operation budget discussion area. I know that the main questions were clarification and not really any like major changes to the actual budget. We proved it as presented. So I want to ask the board, do they feel that they're okay with that particular meeting as presented, or would they like to approve the meeting contingent that some notes on like the type of questions asked are included? I guess Director Vale, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would be supportive of that as well. And just, there was a couple typos in the April 4th one. I realized probably just, secretaries are diligently try and get this sort of out as it was a more recent addition. In relation to the motion about the SLL option 1, I believe it should be the Brantford Student Life Levy briefing note, not reading note, but just a small typo there.
Yeah. I'm sure that we can coordinate after this meeting. Just send a quick list to to our secretary of what we of possible and make this transition as easy as possible. But that's the only concerns I had that I saw in the notes. Does anyone else have anything that they want to bring up? Director Vale, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, I don't want to drag this on longer than it needs to be, but I think a point I wanted to flag is that I think yourself as chair, Mr. Chair, under our constitution, you're actually going to have to sign our minutes throughout the year as well. I just want to flag that under our bylaws. That is sort of a requirement.
No, that's not lost. I mean, that's something that I was planning to do once we had all the pool minutes, because I know that we were going back and forth with some of the finalizations, and then we'll have myself as well as the vice chair sign them properly. And then
I don't believe the vice chair can sign them though, since he's not an officer of the board.
Okay, then just myself. Yeah. Okay, then. If there's no other discussion, then we can move to the vote. So do we have any opposition to this? Any abstentions? As I see none, then the motion carries. Okay. Next, we can move on to comments from the chair of the board and CGO. So myself, I don't really have too many comments. All I can say is that I've been working with the operations and the directors to finalize kind of the rest of our ad hoc committees. Just to briefly just touch over and give a conclusion on some of the ad hoc committees. So for the social media ad hoc committee, not too much was done since the election. So I think we can put that committee to rest, given the good work that we did, which was achieving the quorum for the elections within that time constraint. Same as ownership linkage. Unfortunately, not much happened afterwards due to the unavailability of directors and just kind of like the short time frame that we had. I've informed the operations team again that given the fact that there is no chair elect with the new board, I'm happy to stay on for the part of May to help with the transition to the new board. So that way we don't have any loss of CGO or chairs services, but I won't be requiring any sort of honorarium, so there's no risk to that, to the organization in terms of financials. But other than that, that's all the updates I have. Does anyone have any questions for myself as chair of the board and CGO for the last time? Oh, one last thing. I have taken, although it's not a requirement for me to send in a written response, I do want to confirm that I did take a look at the review, the board review of the chair and CGO's performance, and I do want to say thank you so much to everyone who gave me really strong and constructive criticism based on policies, and this is something that I will definitely make sure to take with me as I continue my professional career outside this organization. Yes. Director Vale, do you have a question for myself?
Yeah, I guess since it's sort of your turn here, I thought I wanted to kind of commend you, in your sort of performance over the year. I mean, certainly, we've had a lot of hiccups and challenges, certainly, but I think you've certainly persevered and through that, and I think you should be commended for your efforts throughout the year. And I just add as well, similar to Andrew, or Mr. Chair, soon to be just Andrew, after as of May 1. I will be around for the duration of the spring term, so I'm more than happy to support the next board in any way I can, and I'll be physically on the campus. So.
Thank you so much for those kind words. And again, as I said in the last meeting, it's been the honor of my career to help and serve this board. I can only hope that in the past 3 years I've done, something positive for this organization that I love so much. But enough with these sappy, salty words. You're going to make me cry soon. If there's no other questions, I will then move on to the comments from the president and CEO. So I'll pass it off to President Young.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I just wanted to say thank you all for I also received mine. And I did want to share that I did take everything. I really appreciated all that feedback, and I will take it on to my future endeavors, as I'm sure that the operations team will also support the incoming president in ensuring that those things also don't get lost. So I do appreciate those conversations. Beyond that, we had our final sort of week in office from the executive team last week. We are clearing up some things in the email and administrative tasks, but the executive team is out of office this week. So if you do have any, if you are interested in connecting with anyone, please ensure to reach out to the full-time staff resources. We will not have access to our emails as of tomorrow. And I wanted to thank you, Andrew, and the entire board for all of your service this year. It has been a pleasure to be the president, and I hope the best of luck to the next board.
Thank you so much for those comments, PJ. Do we have any questions for our president and CEO for the last time? Yes, Director Vale.
I'll start off kind of on the harder note, and then I'll add a comment in after. But I guess I'm just because the board hasn't had the benefit of sort of the board report in I think about a month or so now. I'm just kind of wondering if you kind of give a high level, or if there's any sort of events or anything that happened the past month sort of as an organization that sort of activities and stuff that kind of gone on that just might be interesting for the board and our members more broadly, or ownership more broadly, to kind of be aware of, like any exciting initiatives that have kind of gone on the past month or whatever.
So a lot of the time, April is typically used for transition. So ensuring that all volunteers were able to receive, sorry, I'm losing the word for it, but feedback for their performance, their appraisals, should they have wanted it. Also just ensuring that all administrative tasks were done. We did have volunteer appreciations, but I'm not certain if that was mentioned in the last report. Those did go fairly well, both on the Brantford and Waterloo campus. And we're just, there was not too much to report. We do not do too much events in April. So March did go well, and Mental Health Month did go really well. And I hope that if you had a chance to participate, that you enjoyed all the programming.
Perfect. Director Vale, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I guess I'll sort of end on a more of a lighthearted note. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the president. I guess I'll just call her PJ, make it more personal here, but no. Despite my and Phil is probably gonna like laugh at me for sort of maybe stepping out of my normal turn here in terms of governance parlance, but you know, it's been I think you've done an excellent job. I think as president, you know, you've had certainly a tough year, and so I think you should be commended for that. And you know, it's been a pleasure, you know, serving alongside you and the board, and I, you know, wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Okay. On that note, I suppose if there's no other further comments to the president and CEO, we can again thank her for her service throughout this entire year, and then move on to the comments from the executive director and COO.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. It's been a fairly quiet month as we've transitioned through the exam period. Obviously, the use of our facilities has been pretty extensively limited to eating food and studying and preparing for exams and papers and things of that nature. Wills closed a little bit early, so they were able to participate in the year-end staff wrap-up event last Friday, which took place in the facility of our partners with the GSA, the Veritas Cafe, where we kind of gave out some awards to some folks and said goodbye to some folks. Charlene LaSalle, a long-serving staff member for the Students Union who won't quite hit the 30-year mark, has retired. And will be moving to New Brunswick. So we wish her and her husband well. It's a retirement well earned. We are all also say goodbye to a couple of staff members whose contracts are ending at the end of the month. So this coming Saturday, and they're moving on to other things. And then ultimately say goodbye to the student executive and wish them well in their future endeavors as they move in separate directions, doing all kinds of different things. Other than that, the staff team is working diligently to kind of ensure that the transition of Shane and his team goes smoothly. We've got a full week planned starting next Monday, and basically have filled out much of May for them. And we are looking forward to see what May brings. Hopefully a more consistent weather pattern, not to talk about the weather much, but Sunday was glorious. I don't know what the hell today was, but here we are.
Okay, thank you so much for those comments and updates, Executive Director Champagne. Does the board have, or anyone from the gallery have any questions? Yes, Director Vale.
Similar for kind of certain, maybe on a bit of a more serious note here, but I'm just wondering if you have any update for the board on the concern that was sort of raised, I believe, at our last meeting or the meeting before, regarding the science, that event with the fireworks or whatever, in terms of the risk and all that.
So two things. First, with the regards to the fire, we still haven't formally received the report from SHRM, the acronym for which I can never seem to remember, but ultimately the risk management department of the university. They're the ones who are going to be submitting that formal report. I have not received that as of yet. So I will have to kind of pass that along to the new board once they start in May. But as for the incident that you're specifically referring to, quite honestly, it looks as though it was just something that was in the contract that was missed. So we've circled back with the programming team to make sure that their events checklist and contracts checklists are a little bit more thorough and diligent in their efforts. Largely, I would chalk that up to the fact that the last 2 years have been bananas, and they're not necessarily as accustomed to reviewing those contracts as detailed as they usually are. All told, we just had a kind of conversation with those folks, but no formal performance management, I believe, is required.
I hope that answers your question, Director Vale.
Yeah, no, perfect. It does. I just, again, just really want to make sure, you know, that we close whatever that risk sort of hole that was sort of there, just to, because obviously, I mean, the university is probably not going to be happy about these sort of things. So, and then my next point, and perhaps through the executive director, he can comment on if he feels it'd be appropriate or not. But I think maybe would it be appropriate for the board to sort of make a motion that we maybe send a congratulatory letter, something to Charlene for her, very obviously extensive length of service with the Students' Union, which is not necessarily something you see too often.
I mean, if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to do that. Or if you want us to do it on your behalf, we're happy to do that. However you want to accommodate.
Whatever you think. I just think, if we have somebody there for almost 30 years, that's pretty, like, it's a very long length of time for a lot of sort of not-for-profit organizations.
Yeah, no, she's definitely a rarity, especially with student associations across the sector. She definitely made a point to not try to make her retirement a hullabaloo, quote unquote. She definitely doesn't like to be the center of attention, but I'm sure if the board wanted to kind of pen a letter, she would happily receive it. We can send it to her in her new residence in the wonderful province of New Brunswick.
I think that
Perfect.
is an absolutely wonderful idea, Director. I'll let you take from there.
Perfect. I'll happily make that motion. I mean, I dealt with her back when I was treasurer of the Rotaract Club for when you needed petty cash and stuff. And I know a lot of students, and probably some of us on this call, right, from our clubs and that, have dealt with her. And I think a lot of students certainly have appreciated her service over the years. So I think it's that for that length of service, I think we should sort of commend her and for her, her work over the years with the Students' Union over 30 years. So I'll make the motion. That's sort of I guess perhaps, I don't know if we want it to be staff that can sort of pen the letter on her behalf or however we want to do it. Perhaps maybe, Mr. Chair, you can kind of work with staff on that. Just they're probably in a better position to kind of assist with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can definitely help take the lead on that one there. So I have Director Vale as the mover and Director Boffel as the seconder. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? Yes, we have Mohammed from the gallery.
Just my comment on writing a letter. I think that recognizing long service and good service is something that any board, and I would hope that the future board does that as well. I would support such a motion if I were voting.
Okay, definitely. I think that the sentiments we can definitely carry on to that too as well. Thank you so much, Mohammed. But if there's no other discussion, then we can move on to votes. Do we have any opposition? I see none. Do we have any abstentions? As I see none, the motion carries, and I'll definitely work with Phil to send a letter on the board's behalf and really, express our deep gratitude for those many years of service. Now we can move on. If there's no other questions to the executive director and the COO, we can move on to the board honorarium ad hoc committee final report. So I will then pass it back to Director Vale, who is the chair of this committee, to provide some updates.
You're going to be hearing quite a bit, I think, from me tonight, as I believe we have the finance committee next. So I think I'll sort of share my screen and kind of walk us through the report. I'm hoping, the board is certainly, and just feel free if you've been able to see my screen here. Are you able to see my screen, the briefing note? Perfect. I just want to make sure you're not seeing my email. Okay, so I got the right screen. So in essence, really what this is to kind of come back. So the intention is that this sort of committee will continue as an ad hoc committee, because again, the sort of the work of the mandate of the committee isn't considered fully fulfilled given the timeline. So the suggestion is that it'll kind of carry over the next board, and then such time. So they'll have to ultimately, appoint some more people. Director Phillips will certainly continue on that board unless he doesn't want to. And then once their mandate will kind of obviously come to an end, once they sort of fulfill some of the outstanding pieces on this. So really what the committee is kind of doing here is we're looking to kind of provide some, the committee was sort of directed, as you recall, by the board at a previous meeting a little while back, and sort of taking a bit of a deeper dive. And what we focused on is, what is more realistic. So we felt, given the timelines and constraints, that it was more appropriate to focus sort of on the policy aspects of GP2D, which is sort of outlines the role of the CGO and chief governance, or sort of chair of the board and CGO, chief governance officer, and essentially kind of making the necessary policy amendments to reflect how it could be integrated relative to a new newly proposed role, which would be the government and elections coordinator, which is sort of the direction of the that the board sort of wanted the committee to kind of focus its efforts on from a prior meeting. So I'll kind of go through that, and in essence, again, just reiterating, it'll kind of have to continue. And then one of the aspects is there is a draft job description, some considerations, but again, the committee, just given the tight timelines, obviously, as you can appreciate, some further refinements and whatnot are going to certainly be necessary. So the intention, would be that sort of further work would be undertaken by the newly serving directors as of May 1, who will be on this committee, working with the staff, particularly, in terms of HR and that, to kind of get sort of further massage this job description to make it really see how it can kind of fit in, and I'll get into that shortly. And one of the other aspects as well is, looking at sort of how to fund this role. So likely that would sort of entail kind of pulling from the reserve account, which was, as you recall, the motion I made at their budget meeting on April 4th to essentially move those funds into a reserve account. So perhaps that could kind of come from there. So there is sort of funding within our budget. In the briefing notes, the recommendation is essentially for today's purposes to approve the revisions to the policy as out in Appendix A, which I will get to in short order here. So I'm just going to kind of go through. I'm going to skip the clean version, but it is in the package, and the clean version is essentially what the policy would look like with these changes. The tracked one I think is going to be more useful because it kind of shows you what are the changes that are being made here. And then again, I'll quickly kind of walk the job description and then just some considerations. So with respect to the role under GP2D, really we're only going to be kind of focusing on more section 4 and 6 and 7. But so one of the things we're looking at in the ambit of this and that the committee focused its efforts on is, how do we kind of better align some of these duties of the chair to reflect that sort of it's going to be more integrated and collaborative with this new role that eventually will be come into fruition, the governance and elections coordinator. So one of the ambits was, looking at making these amendments to really kind of make it more collaborative so that it's not necessarily the role of the chair to be doing this explicitly, but rather to be ensuring that this is developed, and this is more largely a consistent theme throughout. So, ensuring that these various aspects and deliverables are actually achieved. So that is what they would still be accountable, certainly as chair, but that it's going to be more the governance and elections coordinator's job to kind of help bring that into fruition, certainly with in tandem with the CGO and the board as a whole. So again, developing training schedule, ensuring that board meetings are the board schedule. So again, they could facilitate, scheduling. So taking everybody's class schedules and trying to kind of find the optimal time rather than having the chair to kind of worry about doing all that. One of the newer aspects will be that seeing as this role is like proposed to sort of encompass the CRO and secretary as well as sort of in one role, that rather than being a supervising role, that the role of the CGO for the elections is going to be kind of more of one of overseeing. And then the amendment here is just to reflect the language in ANCA. So we just thought it was more appropriate just to make that amendment now as well. And again, removing the CGO shall be responsible for hiring, which is a practice, as you recall, the past couple of years has been sort of removed as a kind of a best practice. So that's sort of just a legacy piece that was still in there, but that was probably going to be kind of cleaned up at some point anyhow. And again, just, that collaboration piece. One of the aspects that is being taken out is just the maintenance and revision of the policy governance manual. That's a very sort of administrative kind of operational task. So that would certainly be encumbered with the new role as well. And I believe the current director of policy research and advocacy, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe effectively that's sort of part of his role now anyways, when the board to kind of keep that manual up to date anyhow. So the next aspect is really that, again, just, board members can request an item for discussion by submitting the item to the chair through the elections and governance coordinator. And then the more critical amendment here is just removing aspect 7, which is sort of the provision within the policy that authorizes the provision of an honorarium. So because again, this is really kind of really the crux of why this committee even came as about, is it kind of comes back to our governing documents, that being the bylaws of the corporation, which is more commonly known to sort of ownership, and the rest of the board probably is our constitution, which essentially says we're not allowed to do this. So effectively, seeing as the bylaws prevail, that so effectively we can't really have this in our policy, and that's sort of what got us here today. So that aspect is being removed in its entirety. But I'll kind of touch on that as well. As so one of the other things, and I'll kind of go back up here just briefly, but in essence, so one of the aspects of this, the sort of continuation that's committed, the next board's going to have to really explore is the option of, with respect to, you know, a tuition offset, or how this may sort of look in terms of non-monetary kind of compensation, and determining whether that's acceptable within the limits of our bylaws of our corporation. That so that the role of the committee kind of going forward is going to be more focused on that aspect as well, and then just kind of refine where we sort of left off and kind of finish with respect to the job aspect. So that aspect is certainly still in play, but it's just, we felt, given the timeline, the constraints, and sort of the need to kind of do a deeper dive, that it was better to focus our efforts on these things, which are more achievable deliverables in the short run. So I'm just going to quickly walk through the job description, and this isn't to be construed, you know, certainly as in Mr. Chair.
Just before we
You're on
continue,
mute.
I think it's a good you know, time
For
to,
questions.
yeah, questions just
Yeah.
before we move on to the next section. So does anyone have any questions, since I know that this is quite a lot of changes to the policy GP2D? Any questions?
Oh, Director Bothwell.
Yes, Director
I
Bothwell?
have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to commend everyone on the committee for the incredible effort that's been put into this. It's been a huge undertaking, so wanted to recognize how
Yeah,
much
and I guess
put into this.
no, thank
I
you
guess
for
I'm
those
part of the
sentiments.
committee too, so a little
Yeah,
bit to me,
Director
but
Bothwell. No, thank you so much, Director Bothwell. And, you know, and I again, you know, as chair of the committee, I certainly want to echo the everybody on the committee, including the operational staff. You know, a lot of time and effort and care and due diligence has gone into this to make sure, you know, that we're really making sure that the organization is set up for success in the long run. And so a lot of thought and careful deliberation has certainly gone into this, and I know we'll continue to go into this. So I have certainly faith in the next board that they'll be able to continue sort of on where the committee left off. And I believe Director Phillips had a question or his hand up.
Yeah, would you like to be added to the speakers list, Director Phillips?
I try to. It's okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I guess if there's no other questions regarding the first section of the briefing package, we can move on, Director Vale.
Okay, so I'm again, and just reiterate here, this shouldn't be kind of construed as an exact or anything the board has approved yet, that this is really just a draft iteration. So that's sort of the confines in what this should be just viewed. And I say that just so sort of the contextualization is there. Having said that, in essence, the title would sort of be a governance and elections coordinator. So as you can imagine by the role, the governance support aspect will be there. So that will sort of encumber really taking some of the existing duties of the chair that were more administrative, operational in nature, and sort of in taking those on. So, you know, creating agenda packages. So that would be approved by the relevant chair. So whether that be a committee chair or the board chair. So, you know, they'll be sort of responsible for receiving information from the, you know, operational staff, from directors for a given meeting, and they'll be responsible for compiling it, coordinating, you know, any guest speakers and stuff to make sure that and getting them on the agenda, and then typing up the agenda, circulating it to the board, and really, you know, ensuring that the board can function smoothly. Director Phillips.
Sorry, no, you can continue. I can ask it at the end of your explanation here.
You can go ahead now, like if you want.
I can put you on the speakers list if you want, and we can.
Yeah, Director Vale, you can just continue. I'll ask my questions you're done talking here.
Okay. So and then again, you know, kind of keeping track of the minutes and just really ensuring that, you know, our board filings and governance documents are sort of kept up to date, accurate, and sort of are recorded properly. Again, they would be responsible, you know, for attending, you know, board meetings and elections and taking minutes. So again, the secretary aspect as well. And then, you know, really kind of their job is to really kind of ensure that you focus more on the administrative side of helping the board to manage its affairs. Again, another aspect would be, you know, tracking actions of the board. So, you know, if there are any outstanding items or tasks, and then, you know, following up as appropriate to ensure, you know, that things are getting done or providing support as needed. And then one of the other aspects is essentially kind of assuming the what would existing be the chief returning officer. So they would sort of essentially, I'm not going to necessarily walk too much in depth on this because it's fairly consistent sort of with the existing job description that was approved previously by the board back in, I believe it was August or October, November, whatever it was, for both the by-election and for the recent by-election, or the general meeting election that was held in January. But in essence, it would primarily consist of the relevant sort of duties as one would expect. And then again, just that they would sort of be obviously on by virtue of office on the elections committee and some of these other committees as ex officio, and just other committees and assignments as requested by the chair and or chief governance officer. And then one of the considerations, and again, this is where it's going to need some HR guidance, is how do we, and I'll get into that in a moment actually, but the thinking is it could be a student in the Waterloo, or not necessarily a student, but somebody on the Waterloo or Brantford campus where the office is, that pursuing or completed a postgraduate degree at Laurier. And then there is some considerations here, whether maybe whether we want it to be a current undergraduate student at the time of application, or can it be more of a full-time contractual sort of person, so somebody who's not necessarily a student or recently a student, but more can kind of fulfill this sort of part-time role more as a job rather than sort of while they're being a student. But again, I would leave that consideration to the next committee. And then some of the considerations, and this is more for the benefit of continuity for the next committee, whether, would it make sense to have this role full-time in the summer, similar to, I believe, the AVP for GSR, if I'm not mistaken, is structured in such a way where I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they work full-time in the summer and then essentially part-time during the year, but I could be wrong on that, or maybe it used to be, can't recall off the top of my head, but in essence, maybe they could be perhaps like that sort of break there could be a time where they can kind of prepare for the general meeting of the corporation, really help support the board and its priorities and marketing efforts and so on. And I believe there's something in the chat, Mr. Chair. I can't open it because I'm on my thing.
It's our director of research, vaccine policy, Muller, said that the GSR role is part-time all year around. So.
Oh, okay, perfect. And then again, some considerations about salary versus hourly. So I mean, there are some considerations. So certainly, salary provides a fixed amount for budgeting purposes, which can provide that predictability. Whereas on the other hand, hourly, you may have to have some constraints in there and try to manage to ensure that you're not kind of going over budget and whatnot. And then certainly another important aspect is going to be a policy on the hiring process for the role. So how would the hiring process be? I would suspect you may want to look at a hybrid structure of having maybe the board and some operational staff on this. Again, that's sort of a consideration that the committee will have to look at. And then really the reporting relationships. So one of the aspects that's sort of contemplated is sort of and I'll go back up to the job description here, but it is essentially functionally would report to the Director Policy Research and Advocacy, administratively would report to the Director Policy Research and Advocacy. And that's more of the day-to-day, overseeing their time and kind of providing them sort of policy, kind of that guidance and support, and then kind of helping to manage, and then functionally that their sort of roles are that they'd be kind of accountable for their sort of deliverables, maybe to the chair and board and CGO. And this is sort of done. And a good example of this would be actually with the internal auditor at Laurier, who functionally reports to the Audit Risk and Compliance Committee, but administratively reports to the VP of Finance and Administration at Laurier. And that's done so, because of the sort of the nature of the role, and this is somewhat akin to that in the sense that it's sort of the board obviously sort of has to be kind of at arms, is not part of operations. So to kind of have that sort of that aspect consideration sort of there as well. But again, that's certainly the next committee is more, we'll have to kind of explore how they would want to do that. And then again, performance management, who would be chargeable of overseeing the performance of the employee, as well as, what roles the board play versus that of operations, et cetera. So again, these are just some considerations that, the next committee certainly will want to consider. And with that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report, and I am happy to open it up for questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Vale, for the very insightful and very detailed work. And we can go straight into the speaker list, which I have Director Phillips on.
Yes. So in the instance that the board were to approve the amendments to the amendment found in Appendix A, I can't, GP2D.
Mhm.
And in the time between that being approved and us hiring a, what was the name of the position?
The governance and elections
coordinator.
coordinator.
Who will be taking over the governance duties that the chair previously had and are now to be done by the governance and elections coordinator?
So in essence, in the interim, so the way the policies are written are that the chair is responsible for ensuring that this is still done. So there is still accountability on the chair in the absence of the this role not existing. So that is contemplated for within this. Is that the reality is the chair would and chief governance officer would still be accountable for ensuring that these deliverables are still achieved in sort of even in an interim period, or for instance, if an incumbent in this role, for instance, happened to resign or get a different position at such time that the position was left vacant for a period of time as well. So that sort of has been contemplated. And then again, the critical one here is certainly this is just removing this entirely, because again, that which is not really time bound here, because there's no nexus to that role, just because this is more of a constitutional bylaws constraint. And then this is sort of just drafted in such a way to kind of ensure that there is still an accountability mechanism here. But I would suspect, and again, certainly it's up to the next board, but what I would suggest is probably you recall in the budget, and I believe it's done in priorities, is you may look at having a secretary, for instance, for the duration of the summer, and then that would allow you naturally time to have this role, maybe in place for the fall, for instance. But again, I would certainly leave that up to the next board.
I do have a quick follow-up question to that, and then I believe I'm going to make a motion. Is this role hired by the chair, similar to the CRO in previous years, or is this to be handled by operations?
No. So so as I had mentioned, the committee will. So the existing honorarium committee will continue, and of which ultimately you'll be the one remaining member, obviously. So and then more members. So that role of that committee will be to continue to look to see and ensure that how do you want this to look? So again, there's going to have to be a policy developed on this, and again, certainly the board, the chair might be on that panel, and perhaps one or two board members, and perhaps maybe the director of policy, research, advocacy, or whatever. But in essence, that will be that will have to be a policy that will be added to the existing policy manual that isn't in existence yet this time.
Okay. In that case, I would like to motion that the board of directors adopt the recommendations of the honorarium committee.
Okay.
So I'm just going to actually be more clear here.
Oh, yeah, I have on the notes that it's the motion to approve the revisions to the governance process policy.
Yeah.
Because
we're not essentially, I just want to be clear that so that we're not essentially approving this governance and elections coordinator at this time. We're bringing these forward, but again, there still has to be some more refinement. So I just wanted to make sure we're not essentially approving that at this time. Thank you.
No problem. And we have Director Bothwell. Would you like to second the motion? Perfect. Would you like to speak to your motion? We have any further discussion on this matter? As I see none, then we can go to the vote. So do we have any oppositions to this? Do we have any abstentions to this? As I see none, then the motion carries. And just as a reminder for anyone who's concerned about the interim period, as I said in my comments, I will be helping with the transition until the next board can figure their chair set up. Okay. With that being said, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is the Finance Committee final report. So I'll bring it back to our wonderful special guest again, Director Vale, who is also the chair of this committee. So I will then allow him to again present the screen for another reading.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if the board may indulge me, once again, I'm sure you're sick of hearing me at this point, but last chance to hear me, so let's make it good. So in essence, with respect to the Finance Committee, so out of the sort of the recommendations that arise, as you recall from the previous report, the second report of the Finance Committee that back a little while ago now, actually, one of the considerations, was amending sort of the existing quarterly reporting to better reflect the cash flow of the organization. And so on that note, really what we're looking to do is to essentially update the policy to reflect that, to better reflect the cash flow, because then it'll provide the board with a better picture and insight of, and ultimately forecasts of the actuals and projections, rather than the sort of existing practice, just in light of sort of how the nature of our organization works, where, we get a lump sum, I believe it's in the end of August or something, and then there is another additional payment in October. So there's there's some time gaps, or naturally the cash flow of the organization is going to kind of be fluctuate like up and down and ebbs and flows. Whereas this will kind of get a more natural sort of progression and will allow for better predictability and ultimately sort of accuracy in terms of the interpretation by both ultimately for the board. So with that in mind, in essence, we're looking to better to update the timeline. So in essence, for the spring to an academic term basis, which is that sort of follows Laurie's existing schedule. So May to August again, then the report to come by, for instance, the end of September or sometime in September. And then for the fall term in January, and then January through April for May. And then this obviously doesn't alter the nature of our fiscal year, nor does it alter the audit timelines as well, but really just more provides a better interpretation. I would also add that certainly, as is always our right as a directors, if we ever had concerns, we can absolutely, as a director, make a motion and to request reports from staff on any and monitor policies on a more frequent basis whenever we wish. So there is still that provision as well, but it's just thought this is going to better reflect sort of the present the sort of financial position of the organization. And then with that note, and I can entertain a question, Director Phillips's question first, maybe, or?
No, I'd just like to be added to the speakers list. Pardon me.
And then again, similar to before, it's there if you want a clean version, but I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the tracked version, very much quicker than before. In essence, the just going at the allow the board to go without quarterly reports at the end of each academic term, detailing actuals projections, and then essentially that is under EL2E, and the just updating the monitoring schedule to reflect those the new time periods as well. And with that, that concludes my report. Much more shorter and succinct, and I will happy to entertain questions at this time.
Okay, so thank you, Director Vale, for those comments, and again, quite extensive work. On the speakers list, I have Director Phillips, and then we have Mohammed from the Gap. Director Phillips, you may go ahead.
I think given some of the challenges with getting 4 financial reports out this year, and that Laurie's revenues and expenses kind of happen on a more semesterly basis than on a quarterly basis, it does make a lot more sense to, the students' unions revenues and expenses. I think it does make a lot more sense to have these reports due 3 times a year, and I look favorably upon this recommendation.
I can definitely speak as just to report that the operations staff do very much agree with the this type of reporting, because it just very much reflects the nature of how our organization works. And I hope I don't speak too presumptuously. Do you have any other questions, Director Phillips?
Unless there's anyone from the gallery that has any questions. I see a hand went down.
I believe Mohammed.
Yeah, Mohammed. Would you like to speak, Mohammed?
Yes, briefly. I did want to ask, we didn't go through the clean version, but what would you say is the biggest difference between the current CRO position and this new GEC position? In between each other, what would you say is the biggest difference between one and the other in a sentence or two?
Sorry, could you repeat that again? Are you asking between the CRO and the
Yes. What would you say is the biggest difference between one and the other now?
So essentially, right now you have sort of 2 roles that exist within the organization. So, and I hope you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'm just indulging this question. I realize it's
nope.
I think it's important, a very important question. So, in essence, really, you have 2 existing roles. You have one, the secretary, who we're grateful for his attendance tonight, and I see him just popped up on my screen here, the wonderful Shreyas Alapat, and then we have our CRO, who is Karneet Chalal, and I apologize if I mispronounced her last name, but so again, they were 2 different individuals, as I just sort of alluded, and so those are 2 different positions that exist within the organization. What we're looking to do with this governance and elections coordinator is to essentially bring those 2 people, but have them under one role, but then and add a bit more to it. So this role would sort of encompass being a secretary effectively, administratively speaking, so drafting the minutes, and then more some of the administrative aspects of the chair role, and then it encompass taking over the existing CRO sort of portfolio as well. Certainly, there would still likely be the DRO and those other positions that sort of previously existed as well, but they would just essentially, this is just going to be one role. And again, that there would be a hiring process that obviously would be set up in policy to reflect the stature of this role and sort of the importance of it to the organization. And I know one of the considerations, and certainly the next board will have to look into it, and it would certainly necessitate some constitutional amendments. I don't want to get too offside here, but in essence is, adding maybe another officer to the corporation, that being a secretary. So which would be a director of the board who's sort of ultimately the official secretary of the board, but this is more of a administrative secretary, similar to what our and I don't mean any disrespect to Shreyas, but where they're more drafting the minutes, and then the secretary of the board, of like the officer side of it, would be more of a ensuring that the board's records are properly maintained. But from an administrative point of view, that would sort of more be kind of assistant carried out by this role as well. I hope that kind of answers. I realize it's maybe a little bit long, convoluted, but it just gives you the context.
So essentially, like you're amalgamating the CRO and governance role or the CRO and the secretary role into one. Is that correct?
Yes, and then adding slightly more.
Now, what will that do to the budget side? Because I know there's an honorarium for the CRO and for the secretary as well. So are you combining both budgets for that position?
So just for your context, and again, great question, Mohammed. So the as you recall, the budget, so the existing budget that was just approved, which will be your budget, obviously in about less than a week now, the governance budget. So as you recall, we did keep the I believe the CRO and the DRO and the election sort of related, I'll call them honorariums, in place, as well as the secretary honorariums, to contemplate there's going to be sort of this intermediate gap. Having said that, you'll recall there's a specific one for the summer one, and then the first secretary, and there's obviously sort of the needed. But certainly, and you more importantly, and I believe I kind of maybe alluded before here in my previous sort of presentation, that the chair honorarium, the existing one, which is, I believe, and I can't remember, but I want to say it's probably in the order of magnitude of 28,000 by the time you add in sort of the vacation, like on all sort of the statutory entitlements, as well as the honorarium itself, into so that was put into a reserve account within the governance budget. I don't want to be too presumptuous here, but effectively that would be sort of where you would pull from, and then certainly you can pull from as needed. If, for instance, you didn't need this, say, a fall winter secretary, then you could pull from that. But you're not necessarily going to need that. Again, I don't want to speak too presumptuously here, but I would, as certainly this position hasn't kind of gone through an HR process where we can kind of look at sort of the compensation, mechanisms, and sort of what would be an appropriate level of compensation. But I would certainly say that it would more than be comfortably within their budget, and likely sort of our budgeted amounts would certainly probably exceed what we would anticipate spending. And perhaps, I don't know if the executive director could chime in, but I don't know if he's kind of comfortable with the amount that we have budgeted as well for that, if for this role, like within the governance budget, that if this role were to come into fruition, that we could probably comfortably handle it.
I'm sure based on what we've been paying, there would be more than enough money in there for that position, because you and I don't necessarily agree on what the actual workload is. So yeah, I believe there'll be more than enough money in there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the discussion.
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you, Mohammed.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions relating to the Finance Committee report, then we can bring it back. So, Director Phillips, I see that you have your hand up. Would you like to motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, so can you get the motion of the board of directors? And sorry, Director Velke, please put that back up on there to get the exact motion wording. Okay, so yeah, motion of the board of directors amend the executive limitations policy 2E to move from requirement reports provided to the board on a quarterly basis to a new schedule based on 3 academic terms. So we have the mover, Director Phillips, and the seconder, Director Bothwell. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, do we have any oppositions to this? Sorry, Director Phillips, you still have your hand up on the motion, or would you oppose this? Oh, okay, so no oppositions that I see. Do we have Any abstentions? As I see none, then the motion carries. Okay, I know that we are just slightly behind schedule before we go into our next agenda item, but if it's possible, I would like to ask the board for a 3-minute recess. Like we need to use the washroom. Can I have a motion with the board to have a 3-minute recess and return back at 10 p.m. Motion by Director Phillips, seconded by Director Vail. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, going to vote. Any oppositions? Any abstentions? Motion carries. I will see you all in 3 minutes. Thank you so much, guys.
Don't forget to mask up, Andrew. I'm watching you.
Yes. No.
Miami beat Atlanta. So that's a 4-1 series win.
I need the Grizzlies over the T-Wolves.
They're losing right now by 8.
I was watching both games.
7.
I was watching both games. Atlanta almost came back, although Trae Young didn't make a 3 tonight. And
I hate Trae Young. I hate that.
He
guy.
played brutal tonight.
Couldn't be
and
happier
then-
about it.
Sorry?
I couldn't be happier about it.
And then he missed a free throw that would have brought it to 2. And then Miami, I think, got fouled and then put the game away. Memphis is losing by 8 with 6 to go. That's my stream.
7.
Okay, my stream's backwards. No spoilers, man.
Everyone glad to be done exams?
Glad to be done
20 years
university.
ago.
Yeah, I can retweet that, Victoria.
I'm going to the
I
Jays
mean-
game on Saturday, so if the Raptors make a game 7, I have a very important decision to make.
That is a
Would
very
you go to the Raptors
Isn't the
game?
Jays game
I
an
think-
afternoon game? Wouldn't game 7 be an evening game?
On Saturday, I don't know.
I mean, you might just have a phenomenal day on your hands.
I know.
5-point game now, Phil.
Oh, it says to be determined. Filthy.
Yeah. I'm
To me,
so mad
that's
about
not that.
game
To
3,
me,
though.
that's not a hard decision. The Raptors game is more important than a Blue Jays regular season game.
I would agree. I would definitely agree.
Now they
Yeah.
are the best team in the AL as of right now. They blew.
Oh,
it.
It's
yes, they are.
It's April, man.
I know. I know.
I have Dallas and Golden State making the West final. And I didn't want to do the East because, Raptors, but I wouldn't be shocked if Miami and Milwaukee face each other.
You can't say that. Like
Dude,
you can
Boston-
think it, but you can't vote.
I think Milwaukee will beat Boston, yes.
But Boston just handled Brooklyn. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
Boston's
I know.
looking pretty dangerous right now.
I know, but Kyrie Irving was basically starving, and I think Kevin Durant there's something wrong with him. I think Milwaukee will put up a fight and beat Boston. I think they'll take a game on the road.
Starving or not, Kyrie played well, and I don't think it really impacted the series as much as KD playing bad did. Now they didn't have
That's
Ben,
fair.
and I don't think that guy will ever have a way.
I don't know. You gotta give Boston their dues for defense. Like KD wasn't
Yeah.
just playing bad because he was
all
playing
defense.
bad. Yeah, that was defense
Yeah.
induced.
Jason Tatum was all up in that guy's business.
Tatum,
Marcus
don't-
Smart,
phenomenal.
defensive
Tatum-
player
I-
of the year.
I think you can make an argument for Tatum going into next year, potentially exiting the year as like a top 5 talent.
I already think he's there. I think he's incredible. I don't want to boost my own ego, but if I was the GM of the Sixers, they'd have a title by now. They passed up on Jason Tatum. They picked Markelle Fultz in 17. They traded up to get him. And I think they picked Jahlil Okafor before Russell in 15.
You got to trust the process.
No, I don't trust. No. Who did they pick?
Half the process is in Brooklyn not playing.
Yeah. Who did they get in 15? They drafted Okafor. Who went 4 that year?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
Okay, guys. Sorry to interrupt this very important conversation about sports.
So riveting.
I know. Although the Raptors are still in, so I'm actually quite excited about that.
More animated conversation than any of the conversations we've had all night.
But,
no offense, Brandon.
I none taken. I would probably agree. It's kind of a boring topic, finance and honorarium, but at 10 at night. But hey,
very, very important. I mean, it was a necessary conversation.
Ezra, you
happy
sure
we got that done.
Was it 2014 or 20? Okay, you know what I mean.
sorry, Shane. But okay, well, I'm going. So the meeting has now begun again. So thank you, everyone. We are back to the meeting and we're going to our next agenda item. And I wish I could say that this next agenda item was a more happy topic that we had so far, but unfortunately it's not. So it was brought to my attention recently by multiple directors that some very insensitive comments were stated against one particular director during the final review process of boards. So first, I guess the best way to do it is share what the comments were, and then I, as chair and CJO, will present what I have done so far based on the request of the directors. So this comments were made against our director, Mackenzie May. And so as we can see here, that in the core review, there was a particular quote here that said that lucky that she was a woman, or she would be kicked off the board, but Chair Dang only cared about optics. So I never thought I would have someone present that to me in this news in the very recent weeks, and something so insensitive after having everything that we dealt together as a board so far. I'm shocked and frankly disgusted and disappointed by this type of language here. But if this was a personal discussion that was made at one director, then as the chair of the board, I would have dealt this in a much more personal manner, one-on-one, as the rule states. But because this was stated in such an open session, publicly using the board's name, it was the wishes of multiple directors that we should bring it up here to discuss these type of comments and really admonish them and work in a way moving forward, because this really does set a bad precedent for next year's board, that if these type of comments can be said against one of our own colleagues, then that would really formulate a very toxic type of working environment. Before I open up the speakers list, so I have spoken to Cord regarding this, because I at first could not believe that that was said, and I was hoping that these comments were just something made up for the sake of drama and getting in more views. But after speaking with the Cord editor and the whole team, it was confirmed to me that the comments were said by one particular director. So that's hence the quotations. They've informed me that the director who had those comments came in such a hateful and malicious manner that even the court team was shocked. And the only reason why they wanted to publish said comments and quotes was because they felt that we as a board should know that one of our own had actually made such frankly sexist and demeaning comments against one of our own. They could have simply hid this, but they felt that we as a board should very much know that this was said. Moving forward, they said that this incident has of like this type of hate speech has never happened before, and they've actually informed me that in the entire history of the board review process, they're actually now going to change the process. So moving forward to any new chair or CGO or whatever how the role is being set forth, they will actually, if such a comment is made, they'll actually inform the board ahead of time before the publication because of just how egregious this is and change the process. I've also reached out to directors involved in the board review, but namely Director May, because I know that this is a very sensitive and private comment, and I would never want to bring this up to a public setting without the permission of that director. But but it was the wishes of multiple directors, including that we should bring this to board's attention to figure out what the next steps will do. So I can just say that in terms of my role as the board chair and CGO, I took steps to focus on the principle of the matter, that I have taken strides and learned the mistakes before. So I have not done any sort of external off-board chat communication regarding this matter to limit that. And I wanted to make sure that we are dealing this in the best possible governance standpoint there and tackling the principle of this issue. Because none of these comments should have ever been said like this. And if it was said, if any director had an issue with this, it should have been said at the in-camera meeting. So I have no issue if someone had decided to slight an individual person like myself as the chair, but to do that against another director is not just cowardly, but also just frankly absolutely disgusting to use the board's name in vain like that. So that's the updates I have there. And we as a board can discuss how we want to respond to this, because it was discussing with the court if our silence would effectively condone this action and say we agree with it. Yes, so I see Director Shando, you have your hand up. And open.
Do we know who that was? Who he or she were? Who said those comments?
So,
and if yes, can you mention them?
So the court did not inform me which director it was, just simply due to anonymity of the process. So my fear is that whichever director said that believed that because this process was anonymous, they could have used the privilege of the anonymity and just blatantly said that. I do have my suspicions, but again, I did not want to go on the witch hunt because I don't think that was productive on my part as the chair. But they did inform me that this particular director was very, very malicious and just came in just completely brazenly and just said some, these type of disgusting comments. So
could we start to look into that, who that was, or is it too late? Because this is the last meeting, correct? So
yeah, this is our last meeting with the exception of the Thursday meeting.
I don't think that would be enough time to find it out.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. So there was only a certain number of directors who actually went on and did the board reviews. So it had to be one of them, which include myself, but I would have never made such comments against this. So we can only go through the list of which directors had been on it. So that would be, if you want to know the list, it would have been myself, the vice chair, Director Bothwell, Director Vale, I believe. And that is, and that's about it, I believe. And Director Phil. So yes, Director Vale, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know it certainly wasn't my comment as well. I certainly respect Director Director May. I think she's done a fantastic job, and it's given us a good presence in Brantford. So I just add that.
Okay, thank you, Director Vale. Mohammed from the gallery.
I have a question as to how severe of an incident would this be considered, and what are the repercussions for this?
So because the term is ending, there is no really repercussions, but the one thing that I'm very wary of and cautious that if nothing is done by this, then it technically speaking gives ammunition for next board that they can do the same type of thing and no punishment is to be had at all whatsoever. Like, so, you know, someone could say something completely blatant like that, and that's it. So I believe that it was the wishes that something would be said at the very least, a statement condoning the actions, and would be made at the very least. But you know, if we don't determine which director was the one who did it, then unfortunately that's what we have to leave it at that there. Yeah. I guess moving on, Director Phillips.
In terms of action, I mean, we are in a tricky spot because it is the end of the year. Director Delgadice and I are returning. In what capacity can we publish a statement about this? Is that the appropriate course of action? I don't really know what else we can do.
Well, I can definitely state that the court is keenly interested in waiting for a response from the board regarding this. That's what they've informed me. That they do want us to respond in some light regarding this because of just how disgusting those comments were. But then that's about it. Other than that, if the board feels like there's no other actions that they would wish to take. Do you have any other questions, Director Phillips? Okay. Director Bothwell.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to put it out here, like, it's 2022. Like, why are we making comments like this? I mean, as of one of the two women on the board, like, it's pretty upsetting to see. Not only is it upsetting, it's just, like, frankly fucked up. Like, why are we saying that the reason why she's not getting kicked off the board is because of optics? Like, use your brain here. Like, that's clearly not the situation. Like, sexism has no place on the board. I was super upset to read this. I thought it was super fucked up. I've been messaging Mackenzie because I know she's in a really uncomfortable position. I do know that our term is ending in 4 days, and it's really unfortunate that this happened at the end of the semester. I mean, we know there's 5 directors that interviewed. Like, I personally can use like process of elimination to have a really strong idea of who said these things, and it wasn't me, it wasn't Andrew. So yeah, I don't know what can be done, but like I'm just like shaking thinking about this, because to know someone on the board is so hateful towards a woman, it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't have anything else to say. It's just, holy shit, you guys are grown adults. You're in university, you're educated. Why are we speaking like this? Grow up.
Yeah, thank you, Director Bothwell. Director Vale, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would just echo Director Bothwell's comments. I think they sort of capture, in essence, you know, we're all adults here. I think let's act like it. Let's, you know, treat each other professionally. And I don't think, I think, you know, we need to sort of condemn this in a form, maybe a statement. I don't know, but kind of, you know, say that, you know, certainly we welcome everybody in this board. You know, we value, like I value Director Bothwell, Director May, and everybody's presence on this board. And I think it doesn't matter who you are or what you're. And so I think it's important that we make sure that this board, that the board as a whole, like, and when this board and every board going forward, you know, that everybody feels the board is inclusive and sort of representative of the broader ownership that we sort of ultimately all represent and strive towards best representing. So I think we need to sort of, you know, sort of send a message here saying, you know, we can't, as a board, yeah, maybe this is opinion of one director, and obviously it wasn't Director or Chair Dang, Director Bothwell, myself, and whoever the other, and I can't speak to the others on this, they were interviewed on the court article, but you know, that we don't stand for this. We can't, and it's just, it's, as Director Bothwell said, you know, this is 2022. We value everybody's perspective on this board, and I think we need to really set a tone, particularly for the new board, that, you know, we take this seriously, that this isn't a joke, that this is, you know, we respect our roles and take them seriously and act with integrity here. So I would be supportive, sort of Director Phillips' sort of thing, you know, maybe sending an email to the court saying, you know, this does not represent the view. This represents the views of maybe one directors, because that's what the article said. So I don't know who, but it was, but that this isn't the representative of all 11 of us as directors, and ultimately that of the organization as a whole.
Thank you for that. Director Brian?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat here as Director Vale, and I'm very much echoing the sentiment that Director Bothwell put forward. I wanted to, fully honest, I only read the review to see what my review was, because I didn't know what the outcome would be since I didn't get a chance to do the interview. So honestly, hearing about these comments was quite alarming. If I had known that, I probably would have been a little bit more prepared to say something about this. And I can't look at the final review. It's not loading on my computer. I don't know if it's been halted or something's going on with the cord, but yeah, I just wanted to echo the same statements that are being made by Director Bothwell and also Director Vale, just because I don't understand why a final action of the board where we've been working so well together, I feel it would turn into such a negative space. I don't really understand what the purpose of the comments were to be. Like, I think it's a little bit just, I don't even really know how to respond. Like, I'm quite concerned that those comments were made. So to Director May, I'm saddened to hear that those comments were made near you and Dang's, I guess, direction. But I think this also is a case study, maybe for, like we've said, the next board to find ways to hold people accountable for statements like it's being made, because I don't think that speaks to what the board is about. You know, it's the cohesiveness and the shared, respect and interest of advancing the position of students here at Laurier. And I definitely think this was a step back, if anything. And if to come from the top, from someone who's supposed to be a representative of the student body is little despicable in my opinion. So, like, disappointed to hear that. Yeah, that's just kind of what I wanted to say. So hopefully a new board, if possible, there can be some sort of governance practice for something like this. Not sure how that will be dealt with, but I think it's definitely something to take into consideration given that it's happened. So.
Okay, thank you, Director Brian. Director Phillips?
Okay, so I don't know if this is entirely appropriate, but should the next board consider some sort of diversity, equity, inclusion training for next year? I mean, I don't think this is representative of a problem of the board as a whole, and is really more representative of the character of one of the directors. However, that being said, is that something that we should be proactively addressing, ensuring that the representatives of this organization are equipped to not make comments like this? I don't know. It seems like common sense. I don't see why we need to, but I don't know what else we should be doing.
I can definitely speak to that, and I believe that the executive director can also speak on that. I know, speaking with operations, that the board has always consistently have a gender parity problem where, unfortunately, there isn't, lack of a better word, overwhelming proportion of males to females on the board, and this is something that the board has always had to address. And for sure, the initiative is to take EDI training, and I think that paired with the governance training that we had for the new board, this would definitely be a good one. But you're right. This unfortunately was a comment by one director, but it reflects poorly on all of us at the board. And the fact that it happened at the last minute and brought to my attention like this is just, it's frankly disappointing, especially after everything we've gone through this year. I'm just speechless. Director Vale.
Yeah, I just echo that. I mean, it's kind of disappointing in the sense, frankly, it taints our board as something that it's not. That we as 10 of us directors here sitting in this room, or I guess virtually, don't stand for. Then so it's disappointing that we have to kind of end our term on this note, unfortunately. But I like Phil, or the executive director's idea in the chat. I think that'd be a good maybe initiative for the next board to consider. A committee on focusing on that. But I think another aspect too is making clear at the beginning of the next board's term, the board code of conduct, which all the directors presumably would have signed already, or if not, will be signing in very short order here. That reminding, one of the things is, you don't represent the board as a whole. So when you're speaking to media, you represent your opinion, but not that of the board. So again, you just need to be very careful on that. And then sort of the reputation, integrity, and so on aspects that sort of that come into play as well. And I think maybe another consideration is, and it sounds like through you, Mr. Chair, that there's talk of like a sort of a relationship here between the CGO and chair and the court with respect to these. But I think quite simple. No director should be able to hide behind the cloak and anonymity about to say whatever they want and get away with it. That there needs to be some, I think there's certainly room for constructive dialogue I think that is certainly valuable, but I think it's another to blatantly attack and or to make inappropriate comments and hide behind them and that through a cloak of anonymity. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, no, and you mentioned a big thing, which is that this comments do breach our policy in terms of board code of conduct, which is you cannot, state the position of a board as just a single director. It has to go for the entire board, and this for sure does not reflect the comments of the board at all. Next, going on the speakers list, Mohammed from the gallery.
I wanted, before I made a comment regarding this issue, I wanted to hear the other current board members' opinions on this. I think that I've heard enough to kind of just bring forward my perspective on this. I was actually even approached by a student that doesn't really care much about the board, and except for the fact that they know that I'm going to be a board member next year, having read this particular drama, I guess, and you're like, is the board, do people can really say something like that about their peers? And I was a little shocked, to be very honest. I don't think that it plays well to our image. I think after hearing the different opinions on this, I think that it might be the correct move for the board to issue, I don't know, an apology to the director who was slighted in quite a big way, recognizing that the board as itself, like the big committee, not the individual director who wrote this comment, does not actually approve of this, because somebody, or as I've seen, constituents can read this and think, oh, everybody on the board felt this way about it. So I'm not proposing a motion, but I'm merely suggesting that issuing some type of public apology towards the director who was, I guess, offended might be something that I would recommend be done.
Okay, thank you so much, Mohammed. Moving forward, Director Brian.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say this in the first option that I had for talking, but how exactly would we respond just as a general board if it came internally is my question. It's a little bit of a weird conflict that we have. So I don't know if any other directors have suggestions as to how we should really navigate this, because I think that that's something we sort of need to come to some agreement on to move past, or not move past, but I guess move to the next topic after we find the solution to this. But I do agree with Mohammed's point to say that it's probably best if we do issue an apology directly. I mean, Director May is here, but of course a written statement of our disagreement, and if the board wants to maybe do a signature or sign on it to it or something, I don't know how we could go about it. It's I'll let the more experienced directors kind of take it as well here. So
I think that's something that we can definitely formalize once we come to a particular decision as a board. Okay, Director Bothwell, I see we have a speakers list, and
yeah, sorry.
No, sorry, go on.
Sorry, the Jays just scored. I just wanted to say, I think if we make a public apology or some sort of statement on the board's behalf, I recognize that Director May is here, and this topic is very much about like statements that were comments that were directed towards her. So I think, Mackenzie, like if you're comfortable speaking, if not like fully, feel free to message me privately, but I think we should be getting your take on if you're comfortable with us making an external statement, because I don't think it's right of us to make some sort of external statement if you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay without an external statement being made, just because I don't really know how it would be published. And it's also the last week of our term, so I don't want to be like making more work. But thank you guys for all discussing this, and I appreciate everyone's comments. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Director May. We're so sorry that you have to deal with this right now. Director Bothwell, do you have anything else to add on? Or
no, I just thought it was pretty important that we get Mackenzie's opinion on this, seeing as the comment was directed towards her. So yeah, I'm glad I think we should just maybe stick without making it some sort of external statement on her behalf.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we have Director Shando.
I mean, I think this is simple. You said 5 people talked to the board and 3 of them said it wasn't them. So we have 2 people left. Can we get the other 2 on and talk to them? Because so far I have Andrew, Will, and Botwell. All of them said it wasn't them. So who's left now?
If you want the answer, that would just
maybe.
Yeah,
Chair.
let's get to the bottom of this right now. Let's see who was it.
Director Chandok, I don't think that's particularly fair to oust this person in a public forum like this. I think if you would like to have a conversation about this, that is more appropriate for an in-camera session, and I would be open to amending to add that in here to this meeting. However, I'm gonna step ahead and say I don't think it's entirely appropriate.
okay.
Sorry, I don't know if that's supposed to say, Director or Chair. But
No, that's perfectly reasonable. I guess that brings up to the question of the board. Do we feel like we want to move in camera to discuss this, or do you think that we're sufficient with the response that we have taken today? Director Phelps?
I would like to move in camera to discuss this. Potentially that's okay, just because I feel like my kind of reputation and name is a bit at stake, and I do want to clarify some things. If that's okay with everyone, I don't want to drag this longer than it has to, but I feel like I kind of need to say something.
Okay, not a problem at all. So we have you as a mover, and Director Bothwell, are you seconder for this?
Yeah, I'll second going into camera.
Okay. Would you like to speak to your motions? I know Director Phelps, you have spoken something. Director Bothwell would like to speak. Any discussion on this matter? As I see. Yes.
Could you add whoever you found out? Can we publish a name as a board? Say, or do we wait for?
We're not interested in publicly shaming people, man. Like,
no,
come on, we're not.
Let's go into camera to discuss this. But that's not a prudent step there, though. Thank you, Executive Director Champagne. Director Vale.
Yeah, I was just going to echo Director or Executive Director Champagne's comment. I don't think that that's very appropriate. But in any event, I understand. Obviously our governance practices teams, but I think for the sake of time and everything, let's just keep it on Zoom if everyone's good with that.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Vice Chair Sneedy.
I was literally going to say the same thing. We can keep it on Zoom just because I know some people have had problems with Teams. And I will have to run eventually, but I can stay for the in-camera.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, Director Bothwell, I saw your hand up there.
I wasn't sure if we were going to motion to keep it on Zoom, so I was going to second it.
Perfect. Okay. So in that case, then motion is to move in camera with the board and our board secretary, as well as executive director, or director of research, advocacy, and policy, and the president. Do we have any opposition to this? Any abstentions to this? As I see none, then we'd like to thank the gallery as well as anyone watching the live stream for attending today, and the board will move in camera now.